I was like, I like everything I'm doing. So this is not about the job, right? This is about the boss or the resources or the way I've set up my life or my calendar. But it was such a helpful realization to me to say, I love the work. I just have to do a better job of doing the work in an environment that resonates with me and that makes me feel supported. And those are the small steps that we're asking our listeners to take to set up that environment and their engagement to support work that I think we really, really love. So. Hi, I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, VP for Student Success at Fierce Resources. Thanks for joining us for Cap and Gown. Super excited to be able to spend this time with you. We are excited to be joined today by Dr. Sherry Woosley, who is going to talk to us about all sorts of very exciting things. And remember, we're in October now. And so I want to just remind you about some of the things that are tied to the rhythm of the academic year. Your students right now are thinking about roommate problems. They've lived with their roommates for a couple of months, and so they're starting to get aggravated with each other. Also, remember, they're thinking about, do they fit in? And they're getting pressure from their family and friends. How are you doing in college academically? And so all of that can be really stressful. The theme for this month is a reality check, because it's all becoming clear that this is where they live now. And they're just like, this is my real life. And so it's the hardest month in the very first semester, because they're getting grades back, they're getting their midterms, like they're about to take them. And then also remember, they're thinking about registration this month. So there's a point of decision for them about, am I going to come back? And you want to make sure that you address that before they go home for Thanksgiving. So just an overview of what's happening with your students as we think about this very first month. Thanks for joining me for Cap and Gown. You remember that we always have a little segment at the beginning that is about the State of the Union. And so let's jump into that. Some really fun things for you today in State of the Union. The first one is an article about having your first generation students using YouTube to create just 2 to 3 minute videos for other first generation students. We know that Gen Z really prefers video content. And so this school, St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, has gotten their first generation students to do little videos for new students there. They talk a lot about themes of balancing family life and school, because first generation students are the first ones to attend college in their family. There can be a lot of confusion about what should be happening and how do you balance work life. And so I love this idea of just having some videos to be able to push your first generation students to. Really fun. Okay, the next thing that I have for you, we have a lot of conversations going around about holistic admissions and how we can use the environment that our students are coming from to help us understand about their academic preparedness and about kind of how they're going to do on our campus. So there's a great article coming out of NPR where they do an interview with Michael Bastedo, who is a researcher at University of Michigan. He studies college admissions. And he says, basically, you have to consider how students have done given the context of their opportunities that they had in their high schools. You can imagine, like, some high schools don't offer any AP classes. Some might offer 1 or 2. Some might offer 29. And so thinking about a student who's coming to you with maybe no AP credit, if the context is they didn't have an opportunity for that, it's going to change the way that you think about how they're prepared. What's really, I think, fascinating to come out of this article is that something we know, which is historic success in high school is a good predictor of success in college. Not every time, but you want to find these bridges to say, yes, you don't have AP courses, or you come from a school district that we're not familiar with, we don't really know very much about. But if we can look and see you've had these successes in high school, highly likely that you're going to be able to be successful in our college. And of course, it's the institution's responsibility to really create a scaffolding so that all of the students that you admit can be successful on your campus. Okay, the next one I have for you, I really love. This is coming out of West Virginia. They are trying to figure out how to have students who graduate from college stay in their state. So there's a lot of students after they graduate who are leaving West Virginia. And so they created a program called First Ascent, which is basically a talent development pipeline for recent graduates to be able to stay in the state. Basically, they are giving them this living learning community after college. So they're saying you can move to one of these 5 cities in the state. Students are really interested in having sort of hybrid work environments or totally remote work environments. And so they're allowing students to get remote working jobs, and they're providing things like a free working space, co-working space, outdoor recreation, special events, mentorship, success coaches, to have those students stay together, learn together, and in that first year after college, really be able to continue developing the things that they've already started in college. So I love that. I think it's such a great idea of building community. And as lots of companies are embracing this idea of remote work, I think it's going to be really helpful for students to be able to graduate and embrace that. This article also talks a lot about how for many of these graduates, they haven't learned how to manage online work yet. And so doing it in a collective, we can give them some guidance about here's how you can, work to deadlines and manage your time, even if you're not going into the office. So that's worth a read for sure. Okay, a couple more for you. The first one is about freeing stranded credits. So there's 8 Northeast Ohio institutions who are participating in this program called the Ohio College Comeback Compact. This is where they are finding students who have those stranded credits. They owe money, so they can't register at their old institution. They can't register at another institution because they have their transcripts being held. And so this is just the idea that you're going through and you're finding those groups of students, you're forgiving their debt, in this case, up to $2,000, so that they can come back and these schools can generate some revenue. What I think is most interesting about this is just the amount of work that it took for these 8 schools to find those groups of students who could enroll in this program. So you think about, I think that it said something like 95,000 students who are eligible for this across these 8 institutions. And yet the need to find them, they have outdated contact information, they don't have the same address, they've moved out of the state. And so this is a great article to go and see how much work it takes for practitioners to make this a reality. It has great results for students. I think it's worth something investing in for sure. And they go through a lot of kind of the moving parts of that. But just the idea that you have to go find these people to be able to offer them this opportunity to come back to college is really, really a heavy lift for our practitioners. AI outside of classroom for our different groups on campus. So there's a great article that talks about using AI on campus for accreditation to help you write your accreditation reports, using AI in admissions to help you analyze transcripts, and then also enrollment for them to be able to go in and have a better idea of where they should be doing their marketing. So I think it's really interesting as we see people embracing that more and more. I think we're going to see a lot of value coming out of that. And it just gets to the idea that we need to make sure that we're having good conversations with our students, because that's going to be part of the employment sort of landscape that they open into. Okay, I just have 2 more for you. I want to talk about this smartphone. I don't really know what to call it, but it is just an overview report about how students are using their smartphones. It talks about how many notifications they get in a day. I think it's 256 notifications on their phone in a day. They're not engaging with all of them, but it's like constantly calling their attention back to their phone. And so I think this is well worth a read. It's pretty long, but I think it helps us understand better what our students are struggling with when they're thinking about how they're connected to technology and how it's vying for their attention. And, Matt and I did a great cap and gown a couple months ago about how you can cut down on the electronic noise in your life and how you can teach students to do that better. So I would recommend that you read that one. And then the last one I have for you is my most favorite. It's about traveling with the team. So there's actually a student or a school where the career counselor decided that he was going to use team travel in order to help them with different career things. So it's at Davidson College in North Carolina. The program is called the Road Trek. And this career counselor, Davidson, has decided that he's just going to offer to teams to travel with them. And in their downtime, as they're on the bus or as they're spending the night in a strange city because they're going to play the next day, doing things like setting up alumni events, setting up networking. He pays for the travel out of his budget because he says it's a really incredible way to get deeply connected with students, and just having them go visit different businesses or, practice going and making introductions on the street. He's found it to be really, really successful. He's had about 14 trips over the last year and a half as he's built this in. And what's really nice about it is he finds that there's a lot more appointments that come out of that when they come back to campus because he has these relationships. He showed how valuable it is, and these students are able to get more connected with him. Matt and I were talking about this earlier, and we were just saying what a great differentiator, right? If you're trying to recruit students to say, we have somebody who's going to come and travel and going to really give them this education about how to do career well. So I love that one. I think that's worth a read as well. And that is the State of the Union, which means that I get to welcome my guest, Dr. Sherry Woosley, who is the Senior Director of Analytics and Research at Macmillan. Hey, Sherry.
Hello.
How are you?
I am better for having listened to that. I learned a few things. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. Hey, do you have a favorite month?
It's definitely not October, is it? which I don't know about for you. That's what struck me when you said it's the hardest month in the fall semester. Yeah. And I don't think it's just students.
Hard. I don't either. It's really funny because, we build so much travel. We have so much conference. There's just so many things packed into October that I love the month of October in terms of like the weather's getting cooler and we get to like have fall and all of that. But work-wise, October is rough.
And it's a long month, and it's just, yeah.
It's a long month. It is, for sure.
We used to talk about sophomore year being a Tuesday in the week because, you haven't hit midpoint. You haven't hit, maybe October is kind of like Wednesday.
Yeah, maybe so. I think that's right. It's like you're not over the hump yet, but you can see it. You can see it from here. So, Sherry, thank you so much for joining us. I know our listeners always love it when you come on and we have such good conversations. Let me frame our conversation and then we're just going to run with it. Okay. And I think the best frame for this next hour that we're going to spend together is really kind of an insider conversation about higher education professionals, what we're seeing in the industry. You have so much expertise and have done so much research about career satisfaction and understanding what's happening in our industry with individuals that I want to unpack that a little bit. And I think it's relevant for us now because I don't know about you, but I feel like every day I'm getting an email from somebody who has either switched institutions or gone somewhere else, which you told us was going to happen a year and a half ago, right? That people were in this place of flux. And so I want this to be a space where we understand why, but also, me in action items. And so I want for us to have sort of a philosophical discussion, of course, but then I want us to move to how can our listeners actually do some good assessment of their institution? Maybe not just about how it is now, but is how it's going to change. Is it going to be more supportive or are there going to be differences in the future?
Yeah.
Also do some assessment about how they actually feel while they're doing their work. And then you have so many great things to say about kind of self-agency and how we can change the place that we are just by understanding that we have power and we have choices that we can make. So that's the frame of our conversation. And I want to start with, we've been doing this book by Daniel Pink that's called Motivation. Yeah. And I said last week, as I was introducing the fact that you are going to come, motivation, I think, is a really hard thing for our students But as you and I were talking, you were like, I don't think that's the problem for our student affairs professionals, right? They're motivated.
Yeah, they are. And I think we did that survey with SACSA last year.
Yep.
And so Thomas Bruick and Jason Wallace helped with that. They're the SACSA, kind of on the SACSA research committee. And we did the survey last fall. So it was after the fall had started and we got data back, and it was aimed at student affairs professionals in higher ed. And yeah, I mean, that was the thing that was so stunning, because everybody says, and we see it in the other industries, that I think I don't talk about it as motivation, but like that the job is great, that it's meaningful, it's interesting, it's engaging, all of those things. And when we looked at the student affairs folks, they look pretty good in those things.
Right.
You know, I think I pulled up the numbers earlier. 63% say their job has work that is meaningful to them, like at kind of high levels. Yeah. What, 55% say kind of strongly agree that the work is contributing to a bigger purpose. So they have those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And the concerning part is they have those kinds of things, and yet we still see that 37% were actively job searching in fall, like not during the summer, not during the traditional time frames, but in fall. And one out of 5 were searching only outside of higher ed.
Yeah.
So they may think the job's meaningful, and yet they're looking at leaving the career.
Which I think is such an important part of this conversation, because it is the question, I think, an internal assessment of what is happening, that this good work that I'm doing has become less attractive to me. And I think last fall we talked about, there's so many things about what we loved about student success and student services were stripped out because of COVID. And right, so we have that kind of understanding. But as you think about your work of sort of, we want adventure in our work, we want to have a future, right? We want to feel like we belong. You do have some ideas about what's happened in this profession to really cause so many people to struggle.
Yeah. Also, and I don't think I mentioned this to you earlier, did you see the Coupa study that came out?
No.
Now, the Coupa study was about like staff and professional staff. So it wasn't just student affairs, it was all the different ones. They found that the percent who left was actually higher in 2022 than the year before.
Oh, wow.
So what we're seeing is not, I think, isolated. Like, it's like everybody, I think, in so many of the other fields had big departures during the pandemic or right after the pandemic. It seems that it's hitting higher ed a little bit later. And were you the one who said to me, I think maybe you were, that maybe we had that survivor's mentality for getting us through. And then when we got through, we're like, hey, wait.
We can't stay in that brain forever, right? And I mean, I think it's a really good point that you make, that if you love the work and you think it's good work, then even when it gets hard or it gets overwhelming or you're in a pandemic or whatever is happening, you do stick it out, because you're like, no, this is very meaningful. I am going to do this. We're going to get through it together. I'm going to support my students, right? And then you come out of it and you're like, this job is not what it used to be. I'm not being resourced in the same way. I feel very taxed, and I don't know how it's going to get resolved, right?
The other thing that we saw back then, and I'd be curious about if you're seeing the same thing now, is that they were badly affected by departures around them.
Yes.
So they're short-staffed and they're covering for that.
Yep.
And they have people around them encouraging them to leave.
Yeah, Sherry, you said that last year and it was really shocking to me. And then I went to a conference where the session that I went to, it was supposed to have 4 presenters. Only one of them was there because the other 3 had left for another job. And she was saying, the biggest sort of voice in my ear is my 3 colleagues who went to something else and said, you should leave and come and join us because it's a really different position, right? So that's shocking to me, that you have outside voices that are like, I left and you should too, right?
Yep.
Um, okay, so part of this idea of belonging
Mhm.
for a career is that you feel valued where you are, right? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Well, and I think belonging is a big topic all over the place right now. You're seeing
For
all
sure.
kinds of books, all kinds of stuff. And I think, the ways that we kind of measure it in some of these cases are, yeah, I feel like I'm valued. I feel like I belong. I also feel kind of like I fit and that this is the place for me. Um, I was telling you the other day that there's this marketing Seth Godin guy, but I like this wording. He says people like us do things like this. To me, when I'm in the circles where I belong, it's people like me, people like
Yeah,
us do these things that I like to do.
right.
So that to me is a pretty good, very concrete way to think about belonging,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
For sure. Sorry, I took a whole trip as you were saying that because I'm always talking about the culture code and I'm trying to teach schools about how they send belonging cues. And when we talk with our students, I've said before, like our students come in and they're in danger brain, which is just like, what is this? Do I belong here? Like, is this the right place? Is this dangerous? Are people going to accept me? Am I going to be able to be successful? And so the question of, am I one of these people, right? Do I fit?
Yeah.
And we say, coming out of culture code, the way that you send belonging cues to change someone's brain from danger into, I do fit here. And now I'm in connection brain. I want to see, but I want to find people and be close to them, right? Is that you, first of all, create energy in your conversation.
Yeah, I
You,
love that.
you treat people as individuals.
Yeah.
So you look at them and you understand their story and where they come from. And then the last one is that you talk about your future. So
Yeah.
you say next semester when you come back, you're going to come see me. I'm going to be their advisor. But it just strikes me that that's how you send belonging cues on a campus to your colleagues and to the other people that you work with, right? That we have enough energy to spend on each other.
Yeah.
That we understand each other's context and that we talk about the future. And I'm not sure that's happening on our campuses these days.
And I would think the one caveat I would put on it is we talk about positives in the future.
Right.
Sometimes we bond over the negatives, and that's not really going to help in this
No.
zone,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like, yeah.
exactly right. So it is funny because that future talk is such a big piece.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we've done it for a very long time. I think we have been so present oriented because we can't even imagine what the future is like. And I'm thinking about years ago, Sherry, when you were talking about the next normal, which, in 2021 it is like, okay, but we are going to go back to normal. Like all of this is going to go away and we're going to go back to normal, right? But it was such a futuristic perspective to say, no, when we come out of this, there are going to be fundamental things that are changed for us. And we're not ever going to go back to the way it was. We do have a next normal and a next normal and a next normal. And this is just the way things go when you have these big things in society. So pretty interesting. So when you think about belonging for our colleagues and this sense of future, those two things I think are really closely related. Can you explain to us when you talk about future, what that means in the work that you've done?
Yeah, like when I think about employees, future tends to have two components to it, which I think is really interesting. One is that I see opportunities for myself. And if I want to climb the ranks, that could be promotions or other things. If I'm not really interested in climbing the ranks or I'm not sure, then I just have choices. I have opportunities. I have new projects. I have new stuff. The other part of future that I think sometimes we forget is that it is also, I'm doing things now that relate to my future. So maybe I'm taking on this stretch assignment and I'm growing a skill, or I'm doing some sort of professional development, or I get to, I don't know, attend some meetings maybe that I haven't before, but there's some actions happening right now that I can see are building my skills, relating to where I might want to go or explorations to where I go. So it's not just there's something there.
Right.
It's also that I'm doing things now. The one, I guess the analogy I like is I don't see myself on a dead end. So not only am I stepping forward, I don't see a dead end.
So I think that's so interesting, because the two parts of that are, I understand, right? There is a place that I'm going. But Sherry, I think a big part of that is also the capacity to stop and think about the future, which I don't think we have all the time. I mean, I'll just tell you, like, there are stretches of my lives where I'm not thinking about the future at all. I'm thinking about, what do I have to get done today?
Right.
And then what do I have to get done tomorrow? And then this week, and then this month, and then that's it, right? And so it's both the possibility that there is something in the future and the self-reflection.
Yeah.
I am doing this because of these things. And I think as we are having to do more and more work because people are leaving or because we haven't filled positions before, the capacity for us to delay gratification, and also for us to recognize we're doing hard things now because they're going to give this future. We just don't have self-reflection time about those things, right?
I also think that many times we get in this notion of the future has to be super clear, and it just plain isn't these days.
Yeah.
It is really ambiguous and it is whatever. But I think there is this piece of, even if I don't know my next step or my next whatever, I'm still building skills and I know there are things there.
Right.
If I can't even imagine something, or I don't, as you said, have the bandwidth to even take some time for imagining, I think that's a problem. So it's not that you have to give me a very clear ladder and this and this. If I do this, then I get this. And if I do this, it's that there has to be something out there that I believe is possible for me.
Yeah.
If all I see is offices of 2 people and none of those people are going to retire soon, I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because you have this place of, so the perspective that you just gave us of very long-term planning, I see that there is a future, right? I see that there are opportunities. I can climb the ladder. And then also the short-term piece, which obviously doesn't have to be step-by-step. Here's exactly what you do to get there. But, somebody asked me a couple of months ago, like, tell me something that you hope to accomplish in the next 6 months. And I was like, I have no idea. I have not been in a place where I have 6 months of planning to consider. Does that make sense? I'm like just doing the next thing. I'm not thinking, okay, Rachel, if in the next 6 months you're going to invest your time and energy somewhere, what would that look like for you? And that's exhausting when all you're doing is looking at the next step in front of you. So it's interesting, right? Because there's 3 elements. There's like far ahead, I see opportunities. Mm-hmm. There's what I need to be doing today and how I need to be thinking about it, and the now what. And then there's this sort of mid-range thing about how are you taking steps that you want to towards something that you like, not just what the job affords you, right?
I don't know about you. This may be just from where I sit. I'm in the analytics space. The AI stuff is super cool. Do you know how frustrating it is to have to do every day, when you really want to go spend a few hours and play with something like that?
Yeah.
And that isn't related to what I have to do right now, but that
right.
is related to 6 months, and that may be related to 2 years or 5 years. So even taking the time to do work play can be huge for future.
Yeah, that's really good. So that's related to this idea that you have about adventure, right? That all of these things are interconnected, and that I need to find a thing that I feel excited about. Yeah. And as I look back to this motivation book, it's talking about motivation 2.0, and it talks about it in terms of mastery. So this idea that you are constantly not constantly, you have times where you're in a state of flow, where you're doing things that are just out of your reach, just hard enough for you, and are exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't feel like I have enough of that in my life. I need to make some room for some adventure.
Okay, so when we get to the concrete, we're going to find a few for you.
Okay, all right, sounds good. That sounds good. So I just want to make sure that we remember we're talking about adventure in your job, we're talking about future in your job, and we're talking about belonging in your job. And I think a lot of us are struggling with those individual things.
Yeah.
But you and Joanna Bloor were saying the other day that we also have something that you guys are calling kind of the believability gap. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, the concept of believability gap fits all over, but to me, it fits so well here, particularly when I think of my student affairs colleagues and friends, is they have leadership who's telling them that there are futures, that there are opportunities, that all of this stuff, and I think at some level there are a lot of people going, really, and so the dilemma is a couple different things. I mean, one of it is the leaders are saying one thing and the people aren't sure or don't believe it at all. So there's your believability gap. And the ways that you think about the believability gap is, okay, if the leaders are right, then why don't the people see it?
Right.
Or are the people seeing something that's not there? So from a like sales perspective, they're selling a vision and people aren't buying it.
Right.
And we've all been there. We've all had somebody say, well, you have this coming. And you're like,
And do you think that's because they've been selling it for so long and we're not seeing concrete steps towards
I think
that?
that definitely contributes, right? I think there's also, there's a number of reasons why you can have a believability gap. If you think, and if you go back to classic sort of sales, the question is, do you trust the person telling you the story?
Yeah.
Is there some level of expertise there? Is there sort of earnestness, trustworthiness? And at some level, I don't know that is necessarily true right now for folks.
Yeah.
There may also be some unrealistic expectations. I mean, there are definitely people that think they should get promoted really quickly or that they should get whatever, but there's clearly a communication issue, if not a reality issue. And that gets really messy, doesn't it?
Yeah, because so the person sending the message, I love what you said. If it is true and the people receiving it don't believe it, we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And that can just be you're not delivering the message in the right way for those people to hear it.
Right.
But then you also have this piece where I'm delivering the message in the best way that it could be delivered, and the receiver is saying, you don't know everything you need to know in order to make a promise like that to me, right?
Right.
You don't know how many people are feeling burnt out, frustrated, not loving their job, feeling overworked, not feeling valued, not seeing future. I don't feel like you're down with the people enough to be able to understand the reality of what's going on in an institution. And both of those are really difficult, right?
Oh, yeah. And you hear it. You hear it sometimes from some of the newer professionals that are like, you say this salary is livable. I'm telling you it's not.
Yeah.
So like, is that like, so there's a whole ton of conversations here that are interesting. And I've heard both sides. I think we all have. I've talked to VPs who are doing everything they can, and they're trying to figure out what's going to solve the issues. And they're struggling to do that. Right. And I've heard from all sorts of levels, not even just new professionals, all sorts of levels going, I don't know that I buy this, or I don't know if I want to buy this.
Right.
You're telling me that it might get better or there's these opportunities, but if the opportunities look the same as my current, I don't want that opportunity.
I'm not sure I want to sign up for that.
Right? Yeah. So I think there's some really tough conversations and maybe even some rethinking of things.
Thank you, Sherry, because that's exactly where my brain went, is that we don't have, I think in general, it's fair to say we don't have bad actors, right? We don't have people who are like, this is never going to work and I'm just trying to sell it to them, right? What we do have is people who have leadership and authority that are in a new normal that are trying to figure out, what can I do to help alleviate the burden that we are feeling on all sides,
Yeah.
It's not just our practitioners who are meeting with students. It is the institution is trying to figure out how do we adapt to what's happening in the United States with higher education right now. And so that place where you go from the way that we have been doing things, I don't think is sustainable, to, okay, well then what's the next plan, right? What are we going to do? And that would be a place I would be really, I think you can sell the vision if you start talking like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you start saying the way it has been is not sustainable, here are the ideas that I have for how we are going to make it more sustainable and in a better place.
Yeah. And what ideas do you have, and how do we engage in this conversation?
Yeah.
We had at the summer conferences, we had some of those conversations where you had, executive directors and VPs saying, I know this isn't sustainable. We got to figure out what we're taking off the plate. We've got to figure out how we're going to say no. We've got to, one of the panelists on a panel that I was facilitating said, we've gotten so good at doing all the things.
For sure.
And that has not served us well. We shouldn't do all the things.
That's right. And so the value that comes out of being in this hard position is that we have to start looking at data and saying that is not, I mean, every day there is an article about a president who had to cut majors.
Yes.
And everybody's very unhappy about it. And I understand why. That's really painful. We've always had those majors. We've always done it this way. And yet, when you have to get lean, you have to start looking at data and saying, in order for us to be sustainable, here's what we're going to have to do. And so it is one of the reasons why I'm always telling our clients and our listeners, you need to make your work transparent for your boss, but also for your president and your board. You have to say, these are all of the things we're doing, and this is the impact that we're having, because people are going to start relying on data to help them make those hard decisions about what do we do in the future, right?
So, and flip that around and think that the other way. You have to make it transparent for all your people, all this stuff we're doing, so that when they have a brilliant idea, right, you go, look, we have all this stuff. I love that idea, but how are we going to do this? Because we do have a lot of ideas. We do want the best for our students. We work really hard at it, but there are trades-offs.
Sherry, it's so funny. You've heard me say before that every time I'm on a campus, I ask them about their capacity to serve a group of students. So like your tutoring center, what is your capacity to serve? How many students are you at full capacity to serve? And I've never had a campus know. I've never had a campus say, oh, well, we could serve blah, blah, blah. But I think it's because they're not thinking in those terms, because they will never turn a student away.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, I can serve 200 students. The 201st one, I'm just going to be like, sorry, we don't have capacity to serve you.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question, because knowing your capacity then helps make plans about how we can do things differently. I don't think we turn away the 201st student, but we do say, wait a minute, we're at capacity. So we've got to rethink this. We've got to make it more scalable. We've got to figure out how we're going to do it differently. But it is a question I don't think student affairs professionals ask themselves very often. I think mostly we just say, of course I can do that. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's put it on the plate. And then at the end of the year, we're exhausted. And yet we all have our list of summer projects that have already started because we have new initiatives that we're going to push out next year.
Yes. Yes.
And we're tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a good, I think it is, as we are talking about mastering where you are and having some self-agency, I think it is a great conversation to have with your teams. What is your capacity to be able to do this? And exactly as you said, we can't add one more thing. We have to balance the load. So if you're going to add a thing, we got to figure out what's not going to work for us anymore, right? Okay, so you and I were talking about the marshmallow experiment. I'm going to lay the framework for the marshmallow experiment, and then you are going to give us a new insight into it. So our listeners will be very familiar with this idea that you have little children. You tell them, I'm going to put this marshmallow in front of you. If you don't eat it until I come back, when I come back, I'll give you 2 more or whatever, right? And so then the students sit there, or the kids sit there, and they try not to look at the marshmallow, and they close their eyes and they turn around, and And some of them eat the marshmallow and some of them wait. And this study was saying the ability for young children to delay gratification to get a bigger reward later is a predictor of success. It means that in their adult life, they're going to be able to continue to do this. And that's how, they're going to be successful in life. So you are telling me, though, that there's a new perspective on this experiment. Tell us.
Well, and I heard this on NPR, The Hidden Brain, which is like one of my favorites because, of course, nerdy. But I loved this because the new kinds of experiments and the new things that are being said about this to me makes so much sense. And one of the researchers who was involved in it was on Hidden Brain talking. And what she said is that given her experience, she just didn't because if you take that marshmallow experiment and you say whether a kid can hold off on the marshmallow is a predictor of their life success,
right?
Holy cow. And that's what popular press has done in some respects, right? So I don't know, we just do it in college and try it. But what they found with additional tests and things are that if you do a pre-experiment, okay, which is hey, here, Rachel, as a little kid, here's some markers. We're going to draw some stuff, but you know what? Hold on a second. Don't do anything yet. I'm going to go get the better set of markers and I got better art supplies. Let me go do this. And then they go and then they come back and they go, oh, I couldn't find them. So we're just going to have to do this one. And then you do the marshmallow experiment. The kids,
they're like, no way, I don't trust you.
Yeah,
right?
You're not whatever. And so, but what they're saying, which I love about this, is that a key to the marshmallow experiment is not just delayed gratification, but your expectation that the reward will come through.
Right.
And what the researchers were talking about, which I think is right on the money, is that for some children, they've had a life where the rewards don't come through. And so we then say they don't have, I don't know, self-delay abilities, and then they don't do as well. Well, part of it is this life experience that they've had that actually predicted through. So I think that's fascinating. So this great experiment that was going to tell you everything is a little more complicated. It's not quite as black and white as we thought. But I also think it's true. And this is, I think, why you brought it up. I think it's true with employees. Yeah. I think it's true with college students. If you ask people to delay gratification, to delay for rewards, to delay for stuff, and then you don't come through, is it any surprise that they start going, sure.
Yeah, sure. I don't believe you. And that they would take what they could get now as opposed to waiting. I mean, Sherry, I think this is related to, in the month of August, the number of people that I heard leaving higher education was shocking to me. These are people who are like, hey, no, August 15th, I'm going to do this other thing. And it's a really interesting piece, right? Because when you leave higher education in August, what you did there was you took care of yourself because nobody else was, right? We understand the rhythm of the academic year. We understand that August is when everything starts and when that's new beginnings and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. And so many of these people, it really was hey, I have been waiting for a year and a half for these things that you said were going to happen. I've delayed gratification of those things, right? I've done really hard work. I don't believe you anymore. And so now I'm going to take care of myself because I don't have any confidence that this is actually going to be delivered to me because it hasn't been so far, right?
Or I have this other offer that offers me more right now.
Right.
So if I got to decide on now, I'm going to go. And maybe they'll come through on stuff because I know they're going to come through on the initial engagement.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I think that's such a great insight in general. So let's just sidebar for a second. In general, this happens in psychology so often, where we obviously know the reason people are doing things is this thing. And then someone's like, or maybe this thing. And then you're like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I don't know why I was so certain, right? That was the motivation, or that was going to be the thing. So I love that people are really intelligent, even when they're little kids, and they do take care of themselves. And so some children who have certainty that these things will be delivered can be patient. And some kids are like, you take what you get right now, because there's not any guarantee that something's going to happen in the future. So
I also think that the marshmallow experiment sort of set up that the problem is with the kid.
Right.
And now the marshmallow experiment says, hey, there's some context stuff and some play stuff. The other thing she said that I thought was fascinating is that some of the kids who don't delay, or who basically don't delay gratification because they get what they can now, they also have some, I call them superpowers, of if something gets taken away right now, they're not as devastated by it because they weren't expecting things.
Right.
So I think there's this, let's paint people with this more empathetic, bigger picture context approach. So even if you think about the people that are leaving in August right now, let's paint them with that empathetic picture that they got a better offer. Really, we expect them to stay?
Yeah. Yeah. And it used to be this idea of the work is so good that we just stay. Yeah. The work is so good. I think I've said to you before, I have a good friend who, when they started as a student success professional, the president was like, hey, so we're going to pay you less money than we told you. And they were like, I'm like about to go get food stamps. Like you are not paying me enough money. And the president said to him, we don't spend money here. We spend people. And my friend quit immediately because he was like, thank you so much for being really
honest, straightforward.
But this is not a problem of us. This is a problem of us feeling spent and not seeing things are going to get better for whatever reason, because we've been waiting, because we see our colleagues leaving, right? It is fair for people to be assessing their work and to be trying to figure out if it's worth sticking.
Yeah.
So I want to, sorry, this is a little bit depressing, but I think we just like tell the truth about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a place where it's like, we don't want to talk about it because it feels very overwhelming, and people, I think, really don't know what to do, especially people who love this work. So many of the people we work with love the work. And they're really in a position trying to figure out, how can we make this manageable and sustainable in the long term. So my goal in this last time that we have together is to give our listeners some assessments about how you think about your institution, how you think about your job, and then for you to say, here are things that you can do to take control. Because we do love the work. We just need a different future. We just need to understand better what's going to happen. So my first assessment for you guys is really about the institution. And we've had Matt Boisvert, our president, talk before about this idea of service quality and what we expect from different services that we go to, how we kind of assess whether they are good at delivering service. Well, I think this is applicable to our leadership, our administration, our institution. So you remember these different qualities are, first of all, assurance. How does leadership at our institution assure us that gratification or reward or change is going to be coming? So I'm thinking about, if I'm in an institution, this is how I'm going to know what's true about the place that I'm working, right? Second, reliability. Is the leadership at our institution reliable? Do they do what they say they are going to do? Because that, in the marshmallow experiment, is, I trust the person going to get the 2 marshmallows that they're going to bring 2 back. And if you're not reliable, then how can I make a decision based on what you say to me? I will never buy the vision you're selling because I don't believe that that's actually what you're going to deliver, right? So assurance, reliability. Do they express empathy? We were talking last week about, if you have to ask your team to do something that's really boring, the best thing you can do is say, I'm so sorry. I know this is so boring. Right?
Yeah.
I know I'm working really hard so we never have to do this boring thing again. But right now it's boring and we all hate it. And I'm very sorry. Do they express empathy to you? Because if they're expressing empathy to you, then you can believe that they know enough about your circumstance that when they're trying to sell you the new vision, it's actually deliverable, right? You know enough about people on this campus to be able to say, I know it's hard, but here's where we're going, even with all of the hardships and the difficulties that you're having. Okay, are they responsive? So when you bring up a problem or when there's an issue, how do they show you that that is an important thing? They're going to respond to it. It's not just like all the talking and nothing ever gets done. Is your administration, your leadership responsive to the things that are happening, right? Or is it kind of like, what's the bird that puts their head in the sand? Ostrich? An ostrich?
I think so. That's, yeah.
Puts their head in the sand. Okay, and last of all, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, the past behavior is a great predictor of future behavior. So asking about your leadership and administration, what tangible changes have they already made? How have they shown you in the past that they are willing to make these tangible changes? And that's a really good way to know kind of what their future behavior is going to be. So assurance, reliability, empathy, responsiveness, and tangibility, I think is a way for you to assess the climate at your institution. Anything you want to add to that one before we go on to the next one?
The one thing I would add, I was reading a newsletter just this morning that I thought was interesting. And they said there's a difference between a leafy branch and a branch that has fruit, which I was like, what are you talking about? But the leafy branches in companies, in institutions, in teams are the people that are talking about all the things they're going to do. And all the things they're going to do actually is not what you want. You actually do want somebody who's talking about the things they are doing and they have done some, because that's the trust. They have produced fruit. They are just not leafy. So there you go. How about leafy things?
I love that. That's so good. It's like I always say about our freshmen that come in as pre-med. They're leafy branches, right? They're pre-med. They may never take a pre-med class. They may never be a doctor. But for the whole first semester, they get to tell everybody about how they're going to be a doctor. And everyone's like, wow, that's really impressive. But actually, no, that's not.
Yeah, but they better pass anatomy.
Right? That's what they're doing, right? That's how you know that they have fruit in them. Okay, so I want to move on now to, we've assessed our institution. I want to talk about how we can look at job-related effective well-being. So I've been reading a lot of articles about these recently. There's a great scale that this man named War came up with. He talks about affect being sort of a circle where you have two axes. One is about arousal. So like you're very like high energy or low energy. And then you have pleasure plus or minus, right? Okay. And so coming out of his research, he has done all of this work with a survey where he asks employees to say, I'm going to give you positive affect words and negative affect words. And I want you to think about how much of the time your job has made you feel each of the listed feelings over the past few weeks. So it's not just now, but it's like, I want to think about from the beginning of August until now, how often has your job made you feel? Positive affects are calm, contented, cheerful, relaxed, optimistic, and enthusiastic. And then our negative affect includes tense, uneasy, worried, depressed, gloomy, and miserable. And then he says, once you have an understanding of kind of what your work looks like, you're in a much better position to articulate, this is what my experience is here. Because, you know, Sherry, like sometimes we just have bad days. So I don't want to do this assessment when I'm having a bad day and be like, I'm always miserable. I'm always gloomy. I'm always whatever. But the truth is his entire perspective is that you have to have more positive affect feelings than negative in order for it to be worthwhile. And I think it's why a lot of people love working in higher education, because of course we have some of those negative affects, but then you meet a student in the hallway and they say, thank you so much for what you did for me. or you find a student who's struggling and you help them turn it around. And that's the reward. Like that is what we're working for. And so I would say for our listeners to be able to do that measurement of how often are those things coming up for you helps you know really about what's happening with you internally.
Love that.
All right. And then once you have done those two pieces, then we move to, okay, so what are the solutions? Let's say that I think my institution is trustworthy. I think they're reliable. They're in a hard position right now. I think I mostly like the work, but there are some things that I need to get changed. What do we do, Sherry?
Well, I think this is when we do have to tap into agency. I mean, you said this at the beginning. You can wait for other people to solve it, but that is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
And they may not, even if they are trustworthy, even if they are whatever. I think this is about starting to take small actions so that you start to own some stuff. Yeah. So you have your assessments, you understand kind of your situation, your scenario. Maybe you even do some reflective practices and other things. And then you start figuring out, what would make it better for you and how do you engage in some conversations? So you said that you are day to day to day to day to day. Yeah. And what is it that you want? You want some time to dream. Okay. So how do you make that happen? Yeah. How do you carve out an hour here? How do you engage in a conversation with your boss about it? How do you talk to your mentor first to practice the conversations?
Yeah.
How do you practice saying no? And I don't think that a giant, big, one size fits all conversation is going to solve it all, right? Like I can't go into my boss and say, okay, I need more money, more of this, time on this. That's just not gonna. But part of it is if you've been sitting waiting, because I think a lot of us have, yeah. I think it's starting to take those small steps so you have some agency around it. Do you remember way back when we talked about self-efficacy?
Mm-hmm.
The way that you build self-efficacy is mastery experiences. So don't make the big one, make a whole lot of little ones so you can start building up your skills at this.
Yeah.
And possibly getting more of what you want, better places, whatever. You can go find another job, but you could also try to make this one work.
For sure. So I love that because given your belonging, adventure, right? That gives you places to be able to say, what I'm really missing is future. That's what I'm really missing. So my ask is going to be around future. And I think you have to be creative. Maybe there's not more money, but it would make you really happy. I'm sure you were saying like, can I just have 2 hours on Friday that I block my calendar off to do some deep learning about something that I'm interested in that's related to my job? If you go to your boss and you say that, they want to, if they're a good boss, they want you to be happy. They want to give you space to see the possibilities for this work to be less stressful and to alleviate some of the just burnout that we have going on, right?
So you're a good boss. If somebody asked you, would you say no?
Exactly, right? It's so interesting. You think about so often the way we treat ourselves is way worse than we would ever treat anyone else. If anybody you worked with came to you and said, I need an extra hour off on Friday because I'm feeling super overwhelmed and exhausted and I would like to do this thing, would you ever be like, no, that's stupid, I'm not doing that?
Well, the other thing I think is that then you're not asking the boss to solve everything.
Right.
You've given them an easy yes.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Like if any of my staff came to me and said, oh my God, I saw this really cool tool on AI and I really would like to go play with it. Now, okay, being the good data analytics person, I would say on your work computer, I don't know, does it access everything else? If it doesn't, if you can find a way to play with it safely and you want to take an hour or two, absolutely. If we have a big deadline Friday, I might tell you to wait till Monday.
Yeah, but right.
Of course, I would want to accommodate that.
Yeah. And I think it is I think it's related to that we just keep doing what we're doing. We just, all the ideas, all the projects, all of that. I don't think that we are in a headspace to say there are little things that I could get at this job that would make a huge difference for me? And write them down. What are those things? And then think about what's the small ask that you're going to go and say, this would make a huge difference for me. Right.
Even if you do the assessments and you look at it and you go, I can't stay here long term, that doesn't mean you have to quit your job next week.
Right.
That means that you need to start taking small steps so you can figure out what you want and how to make that move rather than jumping from this one to another bad one.
Yeah.
Like, start owning it and making moves.
Yeah. And Sherry, you said something I think is so powerful. You were saying it's so much easier to also ask for your team instead of just you. Yes. Right.
There's good research on, and I think a lot of people have not been well taught on how to advocate for themselves, but there's also some really good research that has come out about women asking for things and not wanting to be pushy or getting in trouble for being pushy. If you ask for not just a me thing, but a we thing, my team, or I need this for my family, I need this for other people, it moves an ask sometimes into generous space.
Yeah.
And it's more likely that you'll get a yes in generous space.
Yeah. And it feels easier to do, right? Because we're still taking care of other people.
Yeah.
It's just that I need this thing too, right?
What a generous ask.
Yeah. I love that. So I think it's such a great conversation. I mean, I think we could camp out on this space for a really long time, but I just think that our listeners need permission to make their jobs better than they are right now. And we're so long suffering sometimes that it's like at some point you can move to small decisions that are going to make a really big impact on your sort of enjoyment of really good work, right? Which is where we started.
Well, and sometimes those small decisions are going to have a bigger impact than you expect. So at some level, when you're looking at your job and you go, oh, I just want out of here, I'm not going to do that small thing, you're actually punishing yourself.
Yeah. So. Sherry, one more thing. I know we're over time, but I just think it's super helpful. Years ago, when I had a job that I dreaded going to every day, I was like, what is the job task that I'm doing that I hate so much? Like, is it I have to meet with students? No, I love that. Is it that I just made a list of everything. And I was like, I like everything I'm doing. So this is not about the job, right? This is about the boss or the resources or the way I've set up my life or my calendar. But it was such a helpful realization to me to say, I love the work. I just have to do a better job of doing the work in an environment that resonates with me and that makes me feel supported. And those are the small steps that we're asking our listeners to take to set up that environment and their engagement to support work that I think we really, really love. So thank you so much for your insight. It's always such a joy. And I don't know, it's bad, Sherry, because every time we have a conversation, I'm like, well, we should just talk more about this. We should just go 3 hours. I know some podcasts do that, but I'm like pretty bossy about ending on time.
Me too.
Also, we have other things we have to do, right?
Well, exactly. But sometime we should have a fun, like happy conversation. We'll have to figure that next time, right?
Okay. We'll definitely do that. That'll be great. Thanks for joining me. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye.